Yeah, you have to go there and call it out. You go, oh no, I'm not having this. I don't want you. This is a really unhealthy belief.
Yeah.
This is a belief that is going to lead you down a path of disordered eating, or it's going to lead you down a path of hating your body. So one of the things we need to do with our kids, boys and girls, not particularly girls, boys and girls, but help them to build their self-worth from a very young age based on who they are, not how they look.
Yes, that's such an important one, and it's so regular. They say, oh my God, do you think I look so nice, Mom, or to their granny or something? And I would say, oh my gosh, your outfit's so fancy. I love it. Instead of saying, you look so pretty, or you're beautiful. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I'm delighted you're here. So today's conversation is about how we navigate diet culture for ourselves, but also how we help our kids navigate it. So I'm joined by Dr Anna Colton. She's a clinical psychologist and eating disorder specialist who spent about 25 years working with women and families on this area. And it's such an important area to really understand. We covered why labelling food, good or bad, backfires, why restricting a food can make it way more powerful in a child's life, and how to build self-worth in our children that's not based on how they look. So here's the conversation with Dr. Anna Colton. It was really eye-opening for me, and I have a lot of action steps to take after listening to it. No doubt you will too. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next episode. Today I am joined by Dr. Anna Colton, UK clinical psychologist and eating disorder specialist, and author of How to Talk to Children About Food. Her work focuses on helping families build a healthy, shame-free relationship with food and prevent disordered eating from a very early age. So we're talking about how parents can navigate today's very difficult food environment without passing on the anxiety, the restriction, or the diet culture to their children. So I was just saying before this is of huge interest to me because I've had so much disordered eating in the past, and now I have 5-year-old twins. We're both twin moms. Trying to navigate food now is just such a different landscape to when my mother 30 years ago had to navigate me and my siblings' food environment. And I just want to get straight into that element of it. And what do you think parents most often are getting wrong, we'll say, when wrong is probably the wrong word, but what they're doing by accident almost when they talk to children about food? Because already I'm monitoring myself so much as I can't say good and bad foods. I'm saying always foods and sometimes foods. I'm trying my best when I'm around them to have my energy as calm as possible when they are eating ultra processed foods and to not freak out. And that's really what I want to get into straight away.
Well, that's exactly where it's at. So I think the things that parents fear most are sugar, so sweets more than chocolate, but sweets, muffins, cakes, chocolate, ice cream, sweet foods, and ultra processed. And you're right. You can't have good and bad, but the problem is if someone had to translate always and sometimes, what would it mean? It would mean good and less good. So yeah. I would avoid categorizing foods at all, other than by their very scientific group. So you might say, well, this is fruit and veg, this is carbohydrates, this is grains, this is fats, this is processed, but we've got loads of different types of processing, and not all ultra processed is bad. So when you lump all foods into ultra processed, suddenly hummus goes in there. And are you really going to tell me that hummus is not a good food? I mean, frankly, you're really going to tell me anything's not good? It's all about balance. So it's very easy. One of the things parents often say to me, but I don't understand. I don't want my children to have free reign over all foods. And I'm like, no, and nor did I want my children. And that my children are older, and I still don't want my children. I wanted to bring them up with knowledge, but almost more than knowledge, I was so terrified, having spent 25 years, or well, not quite that long when I had them, but now, having spent years and years working in inpatient anorexia units and done inpatient, day patient and outpatient eating disorders, yes, a lot of anorexia, but also bulimia, binge eating, bariatrics. For me, a healthy diet was all about the relationship with food and had very little to do with the foods they ate. Yeah. Now, I know that might sound daft because, of course, I cared. I really cared, actually, for what it's worth. I do really care. And so there was always veg on the table, and there was always fruit, and there was always, and I was lucky. They were good eaters. They went through phases. Sometimes they would eat veg, sometimes they wouldn't, Everything was allowed because some of the kids I'd worked with, or the teens I'd worked with, the rules at home were so strict that they had to sneak the sweets or the chocolate and lie about it. To me, I wasn't having any of that on my watch. I literally was not having that on my watch, and my whole parenting, and maybe I was wrong, and I can be challenged on this, of course. For me, my absolute relentlessness was about, I will not have a child with an eating disorder, and I will do whatever's in my power to prevent that. And I think when that's your frame, how you talk about food is radically different than when you think that healthy eating is about the food. I was like, no, I just want them to have a good relationship, and I want them to know how to cook so that when they grow up and leave home, they can feed themselves, and I want them to have enough nutritional knowledge without feeling that they've been brought up with some kind of nightmare. I'm sure they feel they've been brought up by a nightmare in some ways, but I didn't bang on. I really didn't. And that if they said, can we have ice cream? Sometimes I'd say yes, sometimes I'd say no. A bit like, can we have broccoli? Sometimes I'd say yes, sometimes I'd say, actually, I don't have any broccoli. So I think it feels much harder to be neutral, because we feel we must explain when we deprive them of the sugar. But one, it's not a deprivation, and two, it doesn't need an explanation. It can just be no, not tonight.
Really important to reframe there. And also what you said, I'll challenge you on that. You said your children, it was lucky that they weren't picky eaters, but actually you made a really good piece of content. And I'm sure you walked the walk of it, where you said the children that don't go crazy for sweets at the party, and they're not like super focused and obsessed. And there was a criteria of things that then parents do to support that environment. And I'd imagine you lived that, which was you were quite neutral about the food, as you said already. Your energy is relaxed around meal times. You allow meal times to be fun. There's community, so probably a lot of the things created your children been in that scenario where they were quite relaxed around food, and there wasn't that deprivation piece. But also, like you said in a different podcast, there's a lot of nature nurture work here. You can do as well as you can at home, but you might still have a child that has disordered eating, not because of what happened at home, but maybe a peer, so it's important, I think, to look at it from that frame as well. There's so many factors that create your child's relationship with food, but certainly what you said around that really hit home. Sitting down with your children in a really slow, relaxed way of eating the food in a neutral way. There's no, you can't get your dessert before you get up. There's no finish your plate. It's just like, we're enjoying our food together. We're not commenting on the food. Maybe we say, that's tasty element of the meal.
And yeah, all of that. And I was lucky because there were some nurture things. I was lucky because there were some nature things that didn't come my way, right? But And I should say, one of mine in particular had a crazy sweet tooth, unbelievably sweet tooth, and wasn't a huge eater until it came to dessert or ice cream. And it became a joke because I didn't always want to say yes to everything, because his capacity for pudding was like second to none. It was mind-blowing. But we ended up having a conversation, and I do talk about it just very briefly in my book, but we ended up, it became known as his second stomach, his pudding stomach. So he'd say, well, I'm full, my stomach's full, but my pudding stomach's still got room.
Yeah.
So, we did name it, and it wasn't always permissive. And sometimes I go, do you know what? I think actually you've had enough, or you've had enough this week. I think, not tonight. If you're still hungry, if your pudding stomach's still hungry, you can have some grapes. They're really sweet. Or I wouldn't even say that. I'd say, do you want some grapes? And he'd go, no. I'd go, okay, that's your choice. Fine. You've made it. Yeah. So there was that there was a bit of autonomy for him. But now he's a kind of later teenager. And now he's just naturally, through his friends, become quite aware that probably his sweet tooth, if he doesn't clock it, he'll probably eat more sweet foods than maybe even he feels good on.
Yeah.
But that's come from within. That's not been imposed from outside.
Yeah. I tried to navigate that the other day with my twins, and one would eat pretty good dinners, but she also loves her dessert. We went skiing a few weeks ago, and she was like, I can't wait for the ice cream. Every day she was nearly just eating the food to have the ice cream. And the other day she was like, Mom, I'm just after eating. Granddad gave me loads of sweets. I'm after eating loads of sweets. So I'm going to brush my teeth extra well tonight.
Brilliant.
And I was like, that is absolutely great. But also, you can't, if you eat past way too much sugar every day, brushing your teeth isn't going to prevent your teeth rotting. And just that understanding of we can't erase it. We kind of have to sit with there's an amount you can eat, And that's fine, and it's a sometimes food, but it's not something we can eat to excess every day. And trying to like give an understanding to a 5-year-old, I found really tricky.
But did you need to give an understanding?
Probably not at that point.
So that's the thing. If they don't ask, you don't need to. They're very accepting. You can just say that's enough sweets.
Yeah, she hears that, and that's the other thing. Like that people before this, I was saying, or we're having this podcast, and they were saying, ask how to deal with grandparents.
Well, grandparents are a thing, right? They really are. And it's really common.
Yeah.
But the way to deal with grandparents, there are two things that I think are important before you even think about what you do, is what's your relationship like with your parents or your partner's parents? So what kind of conversations are available to you? Because if you're trying to, it's like, you know, if you're speaking Mandarin and they're speaking French, there's no communication. No. So is there a conversation that's available? 2, what relationship do you want your children to have with your parents? Or with their grandparents? Because for me, again, I had a belief that should be the most indulgent relationship.
Yeah.
That's the point of a grandparent, right? They don't have to bring your kids up, hopefully. Yeah. So they can. My mum always made crepes with my kids, and they loved it. And it was sugar and lemon and crepes, and it didn't matter. And I had to do some work for myself, on myself, to be super chill with that.
Yeah.
But that's actually, she's now died, but they really remember. The pancakes are a thing. And they're filmed with warmth, and the memories of the pancakes are filled with warmth and joy and love and all of those things that a grandparent relationship should be full of. Mm-hmm. So, what's available for a conversation, and why are you having it?
Yeah.
And what do you want your children's relationship to be with their grandparents?
Very much subjective as well on how often they see them. If it's a frequency of every day and they've been minded by them versus if you see them at weekends.
Exactly.
Extremely nuanced there on that one. Because my kids do see my parents every day. We're very lucky. We all have a really good relationship. So it's like really navigating that in the best way. But it is down to me to control my reaction, because that is ultimately how they're going to receive the sweets. Is it going to be a scarcity mindset, or is it going to be mom doesn't care, we can take or leave these?
And is it going to be a fight that gets in between the relationships between you all?
Exactly.
Or is there a way you can say, do you know what? I love that you give them sweets, but given that we see you every day, could it be a not everyday thing? Mm-hmm. Because if you give them every day, I don't feel able to give them as well. And I need to feel able to give them as well.
I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. They turn into the person that feels under huge pressure to give the foods that are super healthy to their children, because they're like, you know, they're getting jellies in school for rewards. They're getting it off their parents. They're getting it at parties. So then by default, you're like, I have to clean up this mess by going really nutritiously dense food. And that, again, exactly what you said, can be the problem, because then you're trying to compensate.
Exactly. Whereas actually, again, if you've got a good relationship with your parents, hopefully you could have that conversation and say, do you know what? I really want to be able to do it at home sometime, but if they get them from everywhere else, then I don't feel I can. And it's really important for them to get it at home and to know that I'm chill and all of these things. So can you hold off 3 days a week?
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, and it's a very calm communication thing, because every single person, even when I look at the twins, they have, you know, my parents, their dad's parents, and they have 2 great grandparents.
Wow.
And it's really understanding that navigating with each person is different, because everyone has a completely different idea of sweets. Like their granddad on the other side, he absolutely loves sweets, associates them with so much fun and joy. So when they see him, and it's not often, so that's fine. They share that with him, that, oh, granddad loves sweets and it's great fun. You know, he does fine. So it's really navigating that. And then, you know, other people in the family understanding their other granddad has type 2 diabetes, and his relationship with sugar is different then. So it's really a lot of balancing.
But what a useful piece of learning.
Absolutely.
Actually, that's great, because you're not imposing anything. You're just using the very real situation that is your family for your kids to go, you know, look, he can't have that. He loves that. He needs to monitor that. We're all different. We've all got different capacities.
You said that earlier on, though. It's about, when you're bringing up your children, teaching them how to look at grey areas, because we love to look at black and white. That's why, as you said, you had a reel that went very viral around food and cancer. And it's interesting, that took so much traction because people's beliefs were challenged around what sugar meant in relation to cancer.
Yeah.
And when people don't get a black and white answer, they're either really put out and try and defend their stance, or there might be learning something new. But for a lot of people, you're trying to understand the bias and confirm your bias.
Well, our mind seeks to confirm our biases, or confirmation biases, always. So if we put in lots of evidence that, let's say, sugar is the root of all hyperactivity, because that's what lots of parents, if I give them sugar, they'll have a complete meltdown, they'll go wild. It's not that common that is the actual cause. If you believe that, you're going to notice it whenever you see it happen, and you're not going to notice what you don't see happen. Yeah. You're going to read articles that tell you, or you're going to look at posts on socials that tell you that that's what's happening, rather than saying, this is just a subset. If I were looking for the opposite evidence, the contrary evidence, I'd find that too. Mm-hmm, it depends what my belief is. And so it's really, food is so loaded, and it's such a shame because we all need it. None of us can live without it. Mm. And we have to interact with it at least 3 times a day. And the distress it can cause is quite extreme. But going back to your point about grey, it's a really different, if you think about it from a kind of a cognitive development point of view, young children don't have enough brain development to be able to think in shades of grey. They are quite black and white, good, bad, all, nothing, you know, because they haven't got that level of cognizance and cognition. Adults hopefully have, but not always. It can be really difficult because grey leaves you uncertain, and people who really like certainty feel much more comfortable, even though it's a more psychologically vulnerable position to need to be one end or another. Mm-hmm. You've got much more psychological protection if you're able to be flexible and not too black and white. But grey is a position of, well, I don't really know. Yeah, a bit. I don't know how much. Oh, well, we'll muddle through. That's hard from a cognitive perspective.
If you have cognitive overload, you're fight or flight too frequently, the overwhelm means you definitely want a black or white solution. And I think that's why the diet industry works so well, because it's telling you, here's exactly what you're going to eat. Don't do any deviation away from this. And I did recently think as well, when you're consuming on social media, you're obviously getting one complete bias, because the more of one video you watch, the more of that content you're getting. So if you decide the carnivore diet is sensational, you're going to just get more of that because you've clicked on one video. Same with veganism, same with lots of other topics. So it's really realizing that.
And nuance doesn't feel quite as interesting.
No.
Sadly. It's not as clickbaity. It's not as, sensationalist. Yeah. So, I struggle with that, is how do I make nuance a bit more interesting?
Yeah. Well, that's literally the biggest task and challenge we have as creators on your hands, because if you have science-backed stuff, you don't want to put a spin in it that makes it black and white, because it's not true. In order to make something actually true and resonate with people and not be clickbait, it's, as you say, it's harder to hook people in. So that's why their videos do so well. But
the other thing is that the videos do so well, and the diet industry booms, and the wellness industry is massive, absolutely enormous. But actually, in the terms of the diet industry and the fitness industries, most of the evidence shows, and most of people's stories are, these rigid plans fail.
Yeah.
They work maybe for a week, maybe 2, maybe 3 months if you can carry on, but they're not sustainable lifelong because they are too rigid.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's funny, like you could go through 10 diets in your life and it's like the same cycle. And I've done that so many times. You do like 1, 2, 3 weeks, you see the scale drop rapidly and you're like, great, that worked. And then you plateau and then you start to gain weight in response because your hunger hormones are sick of it. But you still repeat that cycle over and over again.
Because we've been conditioned to believe that it's our own personal failing if we can't be as thin as we choose to be.
Yeah.
Without realising that everyone has a kind of a small range, which is their set point.
Yeah.
And actually it's quite hard to push your weight massively above your set point, and it's quite hard to hold your weight massively below your set point, or even a little bit, because your biology will kick in, and because your brain will think you're going into a period of famine, and it will try and make you go find food, which is why the kind of ruminative thoughts about food increase, why you start planning your next meals, why your hunger kicks up, why your concentration moves on to food. It's actually really clever from an evolutionary perspective, but in our current world, it can cause trouble.
Yeah, and you often hear people say that, I just need to stay at my new weight for like a couple of months or a year or two, and then my body won't fight this so much. And I think there's that belief because they're like, wow, this is so difficult to stay at this weight. Your body is fighting it so much. But we don't talk about that. We talk about the narrative of why are you not more disciplined? But is there not more talk around the narrative of your body is extremely clever. It's pushing up your hunger hormone. It's, leptin isn't saying we're done now. Ghrelin is like more, and the hunger hormone. So it's funny. We talk about, as you say, from a point of personal failure rather than actual what's happening in your physiology.
Because when we're born, pretty much all babies come out meeting their needs. Hopefully, they will feed for as much as they need, and then they'll stop, and then they'll sleep, and how it goes around. But when we start to get involved with their feeding, we start to often cause problems.
Yeah. Because it was COVID, it was really easy for me to breastfeed the twins for 2 years because I was going nowhere. There was nowhere to go. So it was straightforward. But I always thought that I was like so sick of it at one point because I was like, wow, I'm just sitting here all day. I felt like a milking cow almost.
I remember that feeling only too well.
just literally, I was like, wow, I'd love for somebody to be able to come in and give a bottle. And as well, it's like neither is good nor bad. Both ways the child gets fed. But it's like really you have to be thinking a lot about the bottle timings. And if they're drinking the bottle and they're finishing the bottle because you're feeding it to them, again, that's overriding the natural hunger cues. So it's like, if you understand that, it's easier to think of how you're going to, as they get older, as they're children, as they go into teenage years, that it's like they need to learn back them cues of how to eat, to be satisfied or not, or full, or they know. Because I think a lot of people don't actually know that, especially as adults. Probably children are much better at it. They'd often say to me, I've had enough now, and they leave the plate. 9 times out of 10, the plate won't be finished, and that's fine. But adults, it's very, very different.
Well, we learn to override, or we have learned over the years. And actually, the children who learn to override are the children who either, all sorts of reasons. And it's not about blaming parents. I always want to be really clear about that. I'm not about blaming, but I am about being aware of your own stuff. So if you grew up in a food scarce environment, you're going to have a whole load of thoughts and feelings around the importance of eating food and maybe clearing your plate. Now, that's not your fault, but it does impact in different ways. If you're frightened of sugar, you're going to have a response when your kids eat more of it than you're happy. When they go to a birthday party and it looks like there's unlimited sugar, and if you've banned it, then they're likely to seek it when they find it. So all of these factors. But, I was one of those strange children who really didn't like chocolate. If I never ate chocolate again in my life, it totally wouldn't faze me. It's not something that I love. If I weren't allowed to eat bread and toast, I would really miss it. So we do actually all have preferences, and it's fine to have preferences. Not every child has a super sweet tooth.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment there's so much fear that there is a belief that every child does have it.
Yeah, there is. And that's, I think you will obviously never know the answer to this, but how much children are actually sweet tooth because of scarcity versus the ones that actually, nature wise really crave it, because there is that element of, by us putting the rules on it, they want more of it, and that's a very nuanced thing. But there's a lot of truth to that they're developing the sweet tooth through then thinking, oh, when's the next time I'm going to get this?
But also because sometimes we reward with it. Oh, you've been such a good girl today. Here's a pack of buttons. Actually, you've been such a good girl today. I'm really grateful. I've loved spending time with you. Let's do it again. Brilliant. That's a better reward. It's just, very specific praise, or let's have an extra special cuddle, or shall we play a game tonight because you've been so helpful today that we got time. Those are much better rewards. Punishments, well, you've hit your sister, so no chocolate. Then you're linking food and emotion. So, and all of these things are quite normalised. So it's not that it's a kind of a malevolent mistake or response by a parent. It's just that that's what society has talked about for a long time. And so that's what lots of people have learned. But it actually causes more problems. There is some evolutionary wiring that lends us all to have a sweet preference, because in nature, of course, sweet foods are rarely poisonous.
Yeah.
And they're energy dense in nature. So even from an evolutionary perspective, they were sought out.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Right now as well, so it's, when we were young, we would have done, it was very much like everyone did it. During Lent, if you're a Catholic, for whatever it is, 40 days, the kids would always give up sugar, like chocolate sweets, crisps, that kind of thing, right? That was very much a done thing. And then everyone would like binge eat on Easter eggs at Easter. Okay, that was like our normal childhood. And the other day they came back from school saying, oh, we're doing Lent. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they know what Lent is, because I thought that wasn't talked about as much now. But one twin decided she's going to do Lent. And she just said, I'm just going to do it. I want to do it. She didn't really give me a rationale. She just said, I'm doing it. I said, fine. The other one said, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But it was interesting to hear, because they said, oh, we're not going to get jellies though every Friday as a reward in school until Lent is over. But then we're going to have a party at the end of Lent. And I was trying to like piece this together in my head. Okay, how is this landing for a 5-year-old? How has this really been received? Because I'm looking at all the different things. Reward. I'm looking at not eating it for a prolonged period of time, then overeating it. And I'm like, okay, this is a really good lesson for me in how I react as well to this, because the two of them are doing it differently. So I'm going to be pretty neutral and let them crack on with this now, because this is something that's not really in my control. No. It's something that's in the school. So it really made me think a lot about how many external factors are happening too, and how they deal with something like this is very much dependent on my reaction, and very much dependent on the parents' reaction, really.
Very much dependent on the parents' reaction. Yeah. And it's a shame, because if we have struggled with food, which so many people have, so it's not unusual, but if we've struggled with food, then having children can bring up some of those feelings we thought that we dealt with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm challenged every day.
Yeah.
And even I went back last year to an emotional eating coach, because I thought I really need to work through this again, even though I'd done a lot of work in the past on it, because I realised that some of my biases were seeping into the meal times. You know, so it really caught me, and this caught me again, this Lent scenario, because I was like, I need to be very relaxed around this. And that's, as I said to you earlier on, a big reason why I do so much regulation work, because I felt so dysregulated around diet culture in my 20s, and just the body was constantly stressed. So,
yeah. And those stress hormones cause so many difficulties as well.
Yes, yeah. And even now, when you said there, like you would take or leave chocolate, you know, when I was really in the thick of the disordered eating, I would have been, you know, only thinking about sweet foods all the time. But now I've very little interest in it. And I always had labelled myself as someone with a sweet tooth. And I know now by nature I'm actually not, which really interested me, because I just thought, oh, how could that be the case?
Yeah.
When I've always had a sweet tooth.
I don't have a terribly sweet tooth. I do love salt.
I'm a big salt person, yeah.
Has its own issues, but I think we do have preferences. We do our children a disservice when we assume we know their preferences before we allow them to discover. And one of the things I often say to parents, I don't know if it would resonate with you or not, but the more you think they've got a sweet tooth, and the more you think that they crave and seek sweet foods, the more you need to allow those sweet foods at home.
Yeah.
And that goes against the automatic assumptions that you take them out of the house.
Yes.
You don't allow the access because you know that they're likely to overeat. But the problem is, if you don't allow the access, you don't help them to learn to self-regulate. You don't help them to learn to see what they do. You're not there to have a discussion about how their body feels, or their energy feels, or their tummy feels, or their hunger feels, or their mood feels when they've eaten lots of sugar or anything else. I keep coming back to sugar because that's such a fear, but anything else.
And you've really... Actually, that's something I needed to pull up for myself so much, because when they were 2 or 3, I remember saying, okay, they don't have the ability now to, because they're so highly palatable, the foods, I thought, okay, they're only 2 or 3, they're going to overeat these, they don't have the stop. So I took everything out of the house, and I said, okay, when they're like 3 or 4, I reintroduce it. I didn't. Now the house would very rarely have sweet stuff in the house. And as I said, Granddad would come along with his sweets, or they'd go to my mom's house, or they go to a friend's house, and they get sweets there. So now it's about reintroduction of them back in the house, which is going to be strange for them, but I know that's really important. But it's something I've been kicking down the lane, if I'm very honest, because I know it's going to challenge me more than them.
Right. And I know it's so uncomfortable, but we have to do our own work.
That's it. Yeah. And it's more for me having the fear of sugary things in the house, because in the past I would have overate them. Now I trust myself enough to not overeat them.
But do you really?
Personally, for myself, I do, but I don't trust them, because I'm projecting onto them, I would say.
Okay. So then that's going to be so interesting because it's going to be an experiment for you all.
Yeah, for sure. And how you do it and the reactions of two different people to it, because I already predict, but I might be wrong and might be actually predicting, and that energy and that bias can make that come true. But I'm looking at one of them thinking, okay, she's going to really want to overeat this a lot and the other one won't. But that might be the case at all. Maybe after a week, they just become, oh, it's there when I want it.
Yeah. And that's the availability point. You know, if food is available, it's less highly sought after, usually, because there's nothing special. There's no hierarchy. It's just available. And the reality also is you actually don't want your children to say, well, I want to eat 4 apples for dinner. You'd go, no, that's not healthy for you. You know, you need some more nutrients in there. Apples are great. They're great, but no, you can't just have apples. And you wouldn't feel that there was a whole kind of heaviness, or if you excuse the use of it in this context, you know, real weightiness to saying no. You just go, no, you can't have 4 apples for dinner.
Yeah. And it is all about that additional mindset of more nutrients in general. And that's when I really started to fully understand that myself. It made it so much easier to make meals for the kids, because I was like, okay, we want additional nutrients here. We want their body to feel fully nourished with enough, you know, with blood sugar balance around their gut health, their microbiome. All that became so important because I was realizing the connection between them seeking out them highly palatable foods besides them having enough nutrients. Because obviously if they're not having enough nutrients in the main meals, they're going to seek out, like we say, from an evolutionary perspective, more, you know, high fat, high sugar foods. So it's also that.
But it's also hunger.
Yeah.
So if they're not too hungry, they'll do much better than if there've been really long gaps between meals or snacks, they're starving, they're just going to go for it. Because that too is evolutionary and biological. Yeah. You seek out the energy.
That's very good.
So allowing snacks, I know snacks are a controversial topic often. For some children, snacks are super helpful, particularly for children, for example, who have ADHD and food is involved in that ADHD. You want them to eat more often.
Yeah. So
that they don't get hungry, and so that those little kind of reward signals come more often, and they don't need the big ones. So it's really, you've got to know your child, you've got to know what their makeup is, you've got to know what's going on for them. But when they get too hungry.
Yeah. And that's what they said, like, you know, a toddler every 2 to 3 hours, they need to eat usually. Otherwise there's tantrums, there's blood sugar imbalance, whatever it may be. So it's like, okay, for an older child, it still probably is 3 or 4 hours, and you don't want to go too much longer than that, even from just behavioural point of view.
But how do you feel if you've gone 5 or 6 hours between meals? I mean, most of us, it's about 3. Yeah.
And it's understanding that when we would always have regular amount of snacks, because every 2 or 3 hours, they're like, okay, what's to eat? And even if it's something that's fairly nutritionally dense, depends on the day as well. It's so unpredictable. And it's like, I think, especially women, we try to say, you know, almost behave like a man in that every day we eat the same calories, we eat the same meal timings. But it's obviously so many factors that make us more hungry on some days than others. Same with kids.
But that's no different to a man. No appetite is completely stable. An appetite is a fluctuating thing.
Yeah.
So
they just have less variables.
They may have fewer variables, or it may be that the particular man in question, you know, follows a very strict plan. Mm-hmm. But they have appetite variation just like we do. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you observe, most people eat less some days, more other days. They're hungrier at certain points and less hungry at other points, crave a bit of, I don't know, for me, toasted Marmite at some points, crave a bit of chocolate at other points. We do all fluctuate. That nobody has a static, completely same appetite every day.
Yeah, of course. And when you bring the luteal phase into it, it's going to vary even more.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. Humans, every day is different. And especially with children, taking that into account with growing on top of that as well.
Growing, exactly. And they need a huge amount of energy for their brain development, even if you can't see their height going up necessarily at any given moment. Their brains, it's such an active time of growth that they need a lot of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at what happens, just to circle back to restriction or banning of certain foods, and obviously you've had so much experience around all the different eating disorders, What's really happening when we heavily restrict and ban food for children?
They are learning a number of things. They're learning that they can't be trusted, to manage themselves. They're learning that someone else needs to be in charge of their appetite and their preferences. They're learning that there's something wrong with with them or with their body or with their mind, or whatever it may be, if they follow their urges. Right? Because an adult is going, no, that's bad. No, you're not allowed that. No, you shouldn't be hungry for that now. So they're learning. We're teaching them to check out from their hunger and full cues rather than teaching them to check in. And we really want them to learn to check in, right? Because we ideally want them to listen to them throughout life. We are setting up a food hierarchy where the banned foods are way more desirable than the not banned foods, or the heavily restricted foods are way more desirable. Because if you've got, for example, an apple and a cookie, and you can have the apple every day, but the cookie is once a month, then obviously what's more desirable? The cookie. But actually, any child may prefer the apple, but there's no opportunity to discover if the cookie's once a month, because that limitation makes it instantly more meaningful, instantly more desirable. So we are setting them up to have the very response we really don't want them to have.
Wow.
And then we're going, you see there is a problem, because they've had this response that I've always thought they'd have. And it's like, well, allow one every day, and not for the whole life, but do the experiment. Nutrition is so much more than a meal or a day or even a week. It's a lifelong endeavour. And yes, we want them to have good habits, but we need our duty, our role, in my view, as parents, is to equip them with the tools to manage themselves when they leave home.
Yeah.
Now, if we get to when they're 18 and all the sweet foods have been heavily restricted, they are going to leave home and either be scared of them, because that's the other thing that happens, they become fearful, or to go, I've now got free reign.
Yeah.
And eat loads. So we really do them such a disservice when we heavily restrict. Now, obviously an allergy is a different thing. Or if they genuinely don't respond well, it's a different thing. But always remember, come the time they leave home, whenever that might be, they will be in charge of what they eat. You have a limited period of time to help them learn how to do it well.
It's funny when you look back at your first year of university and everyone's like, living together away from home, and everyone starts to eat for the first time without their parents deciding the meals. And it's so interesting, and we've probably sat down with like 10 people, you'd know what way they're brought up by the way they started to eat when it's completely their decisions. And I think that part really hit home about trust. You're saying to them, I know best about your needs around food, when it's like they need to discover that themselves. And it came into my mind the question of so much people who would listen to this and say, okay, my house is like one of them houses where we don't bring any ultra processed food into the house. We bring no sweets, crisp, chocolate. I'm one of them people that says, my kid can't have X, Y, and Z at the party. And then people are listening to this and their brain is like, oh, I actually need to start reintroducing things so my children don't feel restricted. How do they go about it gradually?
Reintroducing?
Yes.
Offer it. That's one of the best ways to reintroduce it. Just offer it. Hey, do you fancy, should we have a muffin?
Yeah.
I'm going to have a cup of tea. I quite fancy, half a muffin. Should we share it? Nice. Easy. Nothing. No baggage, no drama. The goal is no drama. Give a little bit of dessert at the same time as main course. Yes. If they've never had that, the first few times they might eat the dessert first, but it's not sustaining in the same way. And most children, I can't ever give a blanket all, but most children, within a few days of that, will be going between the two.
Interesting.
Bite by bite.
Yeah. Because we often see, put your crudités or your cut up vegetables on the table, and as an exposure thing, they're going to eat more of them essentially because they're there and they're probably hungry before the meal.
And they're self-service. So there's autonomy and choice.
And there's a selection. And I liked what you said, the tip. I thought that was helpful about putting the kitchen paper underneath all the veggies. I was just like, oh, that's a good idea. Then they don't get soggy.
You can tell who's had lots of slimy veg in the past.
Yeah. Toddler is not okay with that. But I thought that was it's interesting then when you look at, okay, the veg are there at the start and they have the autonomy around that. But they also have the autonomy around when they eat the dessert. Like even if you were to say, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, I'm going to just put the dessert out at the same time for a few weeks and see how it goes.
Yeah. Although I would say to you, if you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday for a few weeks, they will learn it happens on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And there'll be something, you try your best. Sometimes you can do it for a week, you could not do it, you could do it, you can say, actually, we're not having dessert today, I didn't have time to make it, or actually, no, there's no dessert today. It's really straightforward. I think we get ourselves in a pickle.
Yes, yeah.
We make it, we deep it, and it doesn't need to be deep.
No, it's funny, the other day we went to a coffee shop and me and my friend were chatting and they were like, oh, can we have a dessert? And I was like, yeah, pick your dessert. They picked it was a big slice of carrot cake and the other one picked a big salted caramel muffin. And I was like really busy chatting to my friend and they were happy out and they only had like 2 bites each and they were like, we're done.
And that's what happens. Not for all kids, because I know that I always get pushback on this. They go, well, I always get messages going, well, it might work for some, but it doesn't work for mine.
Yeah.
Or, no, it doesn't work for every. But the more relaxed you are around it, the more it's just a part of life, the more likely it is to be exactly that way.
Yeah. We're lucky as well now that everything has shifted in a much more relaxed way around food, especially because my parents are so involved and they're both relaxed about food, and that makes a big difference. But it is things like that where you go to the birthday party and the parent is almost anxious going to the party, preempting how much their child is going to eat. And the child, like, I'm all about energy. The child picks up on that. Children are so intuitive. They're picking up on exactly all your thoughts, just from your body language, the way you look at them. You don't have to say the words often.
No, exactly. They get the vibe. They feel the energy. They learn by watching us, and they are like super sensors, and they just pick up mood. They know, is mummy anxious? They won't have the vocab, but they'll just become more attentive. They'll become more vigilant. They'll become a little bit, do I need to be careful? What's going on here? And they'll know the vibe because that's, until they're verbal, that's how we communicate anyway.
Yeah.
So that's how it starts. And then our job as a parent, again, is to give them an emotional vocabulary and a vocabulary about all sorts of things. But they will pick it up always.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's funny how we talk about like gut instinct and intuition. A child has that in bucket loads. We've dampened ours in a lot of senses as you grow up because of all the different, mental cages, etc. But they are highly intuitive. So anything we do with food, they're learning at a rate, so many times faster than us, and they're absorbing so much faster than us. So the things we do for a few weeks can be something that for their lifetime, they're reenacting.
The patterns are established. But you can do things for a few weeks. We can do something for a few weeks, like trial pudding at the same time as main, and then change it up, right? Yeah. Nothing is finite, nothing is forever. And I think we forget that too. Experiment, test it, get the data. If psychology is a science evidence-based science discipline, do the experiment, test the hypothesis.
I always say that my sister's actually a clinical psychologist as well, and I always say, what's the answer? How do you do it with twins? And she's like, sorry, you have to experiment on that. Totally individual. They're completely different beings, and there's no, again, we can't pigeonhole. I think as well, a lot of things we see you've probably really lived this. You see in psychology, it's recommended we do this with 5-year-olds. Then 10 years later, actually, we're going to tweak that a little bit. That's not really working. So it always changes. So at the end of the day, it's like you really have to look at all the nuances for that really specific situation and kind of take everything with a pinch of salt. Exactly.
Or you expand out. So rather than going for the nuances, you go, okay, so in this specific situation, because we're talking about food, let's roll with that. But in this specific situation, what are my values? What are my guiding principles? Mine, I don't want my kids to develop an eating disorder. Everything was filtered through that. Now, that sounds very dramatic, but basically, everything really was filtered through that.
Yeah.
And so it was all, for me, the absolute focus was on, I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. And so I was really vigilant about my language. And look, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I said exactly what I shouldn't say. And sometimes I went, no, it's crap. And then I was like, oh, oops. But it was not that often. And I could always go, I said that, but I was just really tired and lazy, and it's not. And, it's just that we just don't have it every day.
But that's the important thing, the repair after you're human.
After you're human.
After you behave like a human, not a robot,
Yes.
you repair it.
You repair it.
Okay, I got into a bit of a fit. I was a bit in a tizzy there.
Yeah.
I say this often. I was a bit of a tizzy there. I'm really sorry. And you explain exactly the rationale. And kids, they respond really well to that.
And it's a life skill, because we need it as adults. That's how we negotiate conflicts, how we negotiate relationships. It's how our relationships last, is that we're able to go, you've pissed me off. Oh, actually, it's all right. It's past. Sorry, this is why I did it. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that, or I behaved badly, or whatever. And you move on. It's a life skill. So the repair component, rupture repair as we call it, is just, it's so essential, and we shouldn't be scared of it. And if we really want our kids to be able to apologise, then we need to model apologising sometimes.
Yeah, I think about that often. Probably when I was younger, you would rarely see that in action where a parent said they were wrong. It was very much, it was just the generational thing in the 90s, the adult knows best. And I was trying to the other day think of how I'm going to instill that not every adult is right. That's a really hard thing to communicate, because if somebody says to them, sugar is really bad, you should never eat it, all your teeth will rot out of your head and you'll get fat, right? And imagine them coming home to me and saying, oh, this person said this. Is this true?
But so depending on who it is, because I think the difficulty comes when it's teachers.
Yes.
And that's school curriculum, and that's tricky, right? How do we not undermine the teacher? Yeah. But we can say, you know what, I don't agree.
Yes.
I have a different outlook. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's that straightforward.
Yeah.
In this house, what we do is X.
Yeah. That's often what I say, we have a culture in our house. This is how we do things in the Holland house. And they accept that. Yeah.
And they're so much more accepting than we expect them to be. Because, again, they just don't have all of that cognitive space to be unaccepting.
Yeah. That's actually really one to focus on, that they're the cognitive capacity at that age.
And you might get, but why? But then answer, but why? And answer it truthfully. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't have to say, because I have a history of disordered eating and it challenges me personally. But if that's what's coming up for you, clock it. Yeah, of course. And that's it, honesty and being more transparent and realising as children, and you're really acknowledging you're so intuitive. You read the room probably better than the adult does. Oh, yes. And just really accepting that rather than trying to pretend around a lot of things and, spell things so they don't understand. They get it. They just get everything. They do. And they notice. They're so observant. Yeah. So, it's about being mindful. What I really would hope is that actually people take away that you can be more relaxed and you can be less worried about getting it wrong. I think it's when you think as well of a parent that's really focused on their children eating really well. It's almost like a flag saying, hold on a second. In order for them to do that, you have to introspectively work on your beliefs because you're projecting them onto your children. So a lot of the work you do is less about what the child eats and more about how the parent frames food and nutrition in the household. Completely. Which is like the reverse of what a lot of people do because we just try and over-control the consumption of what they're eating. I mean, my kids, I am a real grazer. If I could graze all day and never eat meals, I think that would probably be my happy place. Yeah. But I really love cooking and I always cook and always have cooked. And ever since they were all really quite young, I've insisted wherever possible on family meals and we all eat together because, I was helped having done years in eating disorders and having done years in Great Ormond Street and big, really specialist units like that. I was aware of much more than maybe I would have been in a different job. But I do. I stand at the fridge and pick. I open the cupboard at 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning. It doesn't really matter if I fancy something. I open the cupboard. My kids actually do the same on the whole. Yeah. And at a certain point I was like, why are you doing that? And then I was like, oh, hi. Yeah, that'll be me. It's me. It's me that's the problem. I'm the problem. It's me, And yes, but that's okay actually, because what they learned is that there aren't hard and fast rules, and actually none of them. Sometimes I would say, well, are you actually going to eat dinner? Because if you're not, don't have it now. Yeah. Please eat dinner. So if you're not, if you're not going to be hungry, but that became more of a conversation as they got a little bit older and they were helping themselves and they got home from school, and it's normal for kids to get home from school hungry and all of those things. But also, I don't like ice cream. It's a thing. I've never liked ice cream. I just don't like ice cream, right? My kids know I'm never going to have, almost never going to have an ice cream. Much, much more unusual if I have ice cream than I don't. But again, that's not a drama because I like all sorts of other foods that are sweet and that might be served. And so if we go on holiday and there's ice cream, they would never expect me to eat it. And the answer is not because of anything nutrition based. I just don't like it. And that's a very easy communication. I just don't like it.
Yeah, yeah. You put up a really kind of emotionally moving piece of content, and it was a video of a woman and a daughter, and it was showing the mother's kind of body image issues and how the daughter absorbed that. Will we talk about that for a second around the diet culture and body image piece? Because I'd say a lot of people listening to this are thinking, wow, how am I going to prevent that?
Look, touch wood, you can be lucky. Touch wood, I'm lucky. But how you prevent it is you really have to know your baggage. What is my stuff? What am I modelling? What are my beliefs and how am I communicating them? And are my beliefs actually, honestly, truthfully the beliefs I want my kids to grow up with? Do I want them feeling as anxious around food as I did, or my best friend did, or my sister did, or my mum did, you know? Or do I want them to feel a bit freer? Do I need to go and get some help? Because the reality is this, and by the way, if you do eat intuitively and you are food neutral, it doesn't necessarily protect. It protects. It doesn't necessarily prevent. That's what I mean. Sorry, it'll protect against. But our kids, by the very nature of the society we live in, are going to be exposed, without a shadow of a doubt, to diet culture. That's an inevitability. So we can't prevent it. It's like, actually, if we allow them to live in the real world, they're going to be exposed to sugar. We can't prevent it. So how do we talk to them about it? And I think that's the thing. What are the conversations we want to have? So, you know, how do you call it out? You go, you know what, that's a belief that's diet culture. Now, you might not say diet culture to a 5-year-old, but you might go, I don't agree with that. Yeah. Actually, I want all foods in this house. Finished. I don't believe in labelling food.
Yes, yeah, because it's really interesting when you look at, say, my generation, we're in our mid-30s, a lot of our mothers would have been really in that kind of like 80s, no fat, you have to be thin, otherwise life isn't worth living kind of scenario. And we're living now that, like, me and a group of friends one day were like, oh my God, your mom went to Weight Watchers as well. Like, there was so many things that we've completely normalised, but 9 times out of 10, it didn't impact the person detrimentally. But now we're about to navigate completely different territory where you're not just getting it anymore in a magazine like our mothers did. It's everywhere, and it's all over social media, and it's a very different scenario to kind of navigate, I think, because of the exposure piece.
But that's where you have to be so active in calling it out, and that's where you have to be proactive, I think, and preemptive in their digital literacy education. So actually, I would say it's probably more important to educate around diet culture than potentially what nutrients certain foods have. You know?
Agree. Yeah.
But that's quite challenging for many people to say that, because so many of us are pretty hooked up in diet culture. Look, I do what I do for a living. I've done it for 25 years. Does diet culture still get me? 100%. Yeah. Do I sometimes find myself thinking or saying something and going, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really hard. It's so powerful and it's pervasive. It's everywhere.
You pushed on a good point there, though, that a lot of people would actually ignore it because, like you say, they don't want to feed into it more. But it's the reverse you need to do, where you need to tackle it in the household and say, look, this is what it is, and explaining for the age appropriate, whatever age your child is. But it really is actually tackling it.
Yeah, you have to go there and call it out. You go, oh no, I'm not having this. I don't want you. This is a really unhealthy belief.
Yeah.
This is a belief that is going to lead you down a path of disordered eating, or it's going to lead you down a path of hating your body. So one of the things we need to do with our kids, boys and girls, not particularly girls, boys and girls, but you know, is help them to build their self-worth from a very young age based on who they are, not how they look.
Yes, that's such an important one, and it's so regular. I think of, you know, they say, oh my God, do you think I look so nice, Mom, or to their granny or something, and I would say, oh my gosh, your outfit's so fancy, I love it, instead of saying you look so pretty, or you're beautiful, because I think that's something that is just, it's actually incredible when my twins are girls, like, and see the amount of times people will comment on the appearance to me and they're within earshot is absolutely wild. And it was done to us when we were young so much as well. But now when you're aware of it, you're thinking, of course, when they're older, they're going to be so, almost waiting for a compliment. And if they don't get the compliment, they feel that they failed somehow.
Yeah.
That's, like you're saying, you really need to build self-worth and all the other things going on. Not
all
just
the other things, what is it that your friends love about you? What do you do in the playground? What makes you laugh? What is it that you like about your friends? Because it's really unlikely that they're going to go, this is my best friend because she's got skinny legs.
Yeah.
They're just
But
not.
it is actually having them conversations, though, regularly going back to the self-worth piece. Wow, this was all so eye-opening. Just where will people find you? Because I'm sure after this, a lot of people will want to follow your content. I love the content you put out.
That's very kind. Thank you. So I'm on Insta at Dr Anna Colton, TikTok, which actually I do less eating on because it's harder on TikTok. But it is also at Dr Anna Colton. My book, How to Talk to Children About Food, is everywhere. You can get it everywhere. Kindle, paperback, audio, whatever you want. And then I have a podcast, Chew on This, with Dr Anna Colton, which is not parenting focused specifically, but it's everything about food and our relationship with food and how food plays in our life. So I'm pretty findable.
Yeah,
and YouTube. Podcast is video on YouTube as well.
Fantastic. I can't wait to dive into that book. It'll be a great handbook to have just through the years to navigate things.
I hope so.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anna. Speak soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
So that was my conversation with Dr Anna Colton. 2 things I'm taking away from this. The first is that our kids learn about food from how we act around it. If we're anxious or restrictive around it, they absorb that. On the other side of that, if we're calm and neutral, they absorb that too. The second is that when diet culture shows up around them, from a teacher, a friend, a grandparent, a TikTok, we actually have to say something rather than let it pass. All of Anna's details are in the show notes, and also the Rebalance membership is now open. So the link is in the show notes. It's the membership where we focus on daily actionable steps so you can sleep through the night, lose fat long term, and feel like yourself again, all by putting regulation and female nervous system regulation at the forefront. I will see you in the next episode.